Prince Leopold probably would have survived the accident that killed him, if not for the rare genetic disorder that he inherited from his mother. While the first child of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert was only a girl, the daughter they nicknamed Vicky was still destined for great things from a young age. Born in 1840, the marriage of Vicky in 1858 was orchestrated so she would join another major power, Prussia, and influence policy there. While she had little choice in her marriage partner, fortunately she and Crown Prince Frederick fell madly in love and went on to have 8 children. The country's victory in the Franco-Prussian War saw the creation of the country of Germany, with the Prussian royal family in charge, and Frederick became heir to the new empire. Frederick and Vicky planned to rule as co-regents and steer Germany into a more liberal direction. But in one of history's great what-ifs, Frederick only reigned for 99 days before dying of throat cancer. Their son Wilhelm became the new Kaiser, with the widowed Vicky choosing to wear black for the rest of her life like her mother Queen Victoria. And like her mother, Vicky also died in 1901. Her death at the age of 60 meant she didn't have to watch as her son, who undid all his parents' liberal policies, waged war against England during World War I. While Queen Victoria was a woman, she wanted a son to inherit her throne, so everyone was thrilled when her second child was a boy. Born in 1841, Prince Albert Edward, known as Bertie, was heir to the throne from day one. However, Victoria found endless faults with her heir, and she even managed to blame him irrationally for Prince Albert's death in 1861. What was true was that Bertie grew up wild. It was hoped that marriage would calm him down, but despite his marriage to the stunning Princess Alexandra of Denmark and the 5 children they had together, he kept up his playboy ways. He was not faithful to Alexandra, having continual affairs with aristocratic women in their circle of friends, including the mother of Winston Churchill. One part of the problem was that Bertie was constantly bored. Queen Victoria, instead of training him for the role he would one day have as king, instead actively avoided giving him anything official to do, so Bertie filled his days with things he found entertaining, fashion and parties to shooting and women.
Prince Edward was a pleasure seeker. His social life, it was sort of an endless round of house parties, shooting parties, race parties.
He finally became king in 1901, taking the regnal name Edward VII. As monarch, he traveled extensively in Europe and tried to keep peace on the continent, including with his despised nephew, Kaiser Wilhelm II. After having waited so long to become king, he reigned for only 9 years. He died in 1910, aged 68. Princess Alice was born in 1843. She married the future Grand Duke Louis IV of Hesse in 1862, but as her father Prince Albert had died 7 months before the wedding, it was a subdued affair. Sadly, her luck never got better. When the Austro-Prussian War began, Hesse sided with Austria, meaning Alice and her sister Vicky were technically enemies. Alice's marriage also deteriorated over time, as shown by the pained letters she wrote to him. For example, one said in part, "I've tried again and again to talk to you about more serious things, when I felt the need to do so, but we never meet each other. I feel true companionship is an impossibility for us because our thoughts will never meet."
Alice had a very strong, feisty sense of self.
Alice and Louis had 7 children, some of whom died tragically. One son was a hemophiliac who died in 1873 at the age of 2 after falling out of a window. 5 years later, a diphtheria epidemic struck the family, claiming the life of 4-year-old Marie. While comforting her remaining children, Alice was infected herself and died at the age of 35, exactly 17 years to the day after her father. It wasn't the family's last tragedy, though. Alice's daughter Alexandra married into the Russian royal family and became Tsarina, and in 1918, she was murdered along with her husband and all their children during the Russian Revolution. Born in 1844, Prince Alfred knew he wanted to go into the Royal Navy when he was just a child. He shipped out at 14, and the next 3 decades of his life were devoted to the Navy in one way or another. Incredibly well-traveled, he visited many of the colonies of the British Empire. However, it could have turned out differently. When the King of Greece was deposed in 1862, a vote in that country picked the 18-year-old Alfred to be their new ruler, but for various political and personal reasons, that didn't end up happening. This didn't mean Alfred was stuck with his eventual English title Duke of Edinburgh forever, though. Since his older brother was going to be a bit busy with the job of being king once her mother died, Alfred inherited the title of Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha from their uncle Ernest in 1893. He was also made the Royal Navy's Admiral of the Fleet that same year. Like his mother, who survived 8 assassination attempts during her reign, someone also once tried to kill Alfred while he was in Australia. He wrote a letter after the events, promising he didn't take it personally. The cowardly act of one individual has not in any degree shaken my confidence in the loyalty of the people of this colony. The prince married Grand Duchess Maria Alexandrovna of Russia in 1874, and the couple had 5 children, although they weren't actually very happy together. Alfred died 6 months before his mother on July 30th, 1900, age 55. Of all Queen Victoria's children, Princess Helena, who was born in 1846, was perhaps the most active in the kind of charity work expected of the royal family today. She assisted with the founding of the British Red Cross, and she was especially passionate about advancing the career of nurses in the country, holding the position of president for both the Workhouse Infirmary Nursing Association and the Royal British Nurses Association. Outside of the healthcare field, she helped get the School of Art Needlework, now the Royal School of Needlework, off the ground with fundraising and by becoming its first president. The reason Helena was able to do so much work in her home country was that, unlike some of her siblings, she never left. While she married a foreigner, Prince Christian of Schleswig-Holstein, he was effectively broke, so he agreed to stay with her in Britain where she could be close to her mother. While they had a decade-and-a-half age gap, the marriage was a very happy one, and the couple had 5 children together, although, tragically, one died at only 8 days old, and Helena's 6th and final pregnancy ended in a stillbirth. Their eldest child, a son, died of disease while fighting in the Boer War in 1900. During the 1890s, Helena became addicted to opium, which was legal at the time. After being cut off by her doctor, she overcame her dependency, although it was a difficult process. She ultimately died on June 9, 1923, age 77. Born in 1848, Princess Louise was one of those people who was genuinely ahead of their time. A skilled artist, she was especially adept at sculpting, and today her works are part of the collections of the National Gallery of Canada, the Royal Academy of Arts, and Britain's National Portrait Gallery, among others. She mixed with artists from very different backgrounds than she had. She even openly supported women's suffrage, but she had a difficult youth.
And she was constantly expected to be in full-time mourning for her father. She wasn't expected to enjoy anything.
Knowing she had to get married, and without any especially good options, Louise took the then unheard-of decision to marry one of her mother's subjects, rather than a member of the royal family, the Scottish Marquess of Lorne, later Duke of Argyll. Unfortunately, the marriage had significant ups and downs. The couple, who did not have any children, separated and reunited several times. When her husband was appointed Governor-General of Canada, she moved with him to North America, but returned to England alone after being injured in a serious sleigh accident. The two ultimately reconciled in 1911, just 3 years before his death. Louise lived alone for the next quarter of a century before she passed away on December 3, 1939, aged 91, wearing her wedding veil. Born in 1850, Prince Arthur was named after the illustrious Duke of Wellington, who had won the Battle of Waterloo against Napoleon before Queen Victoria was even born. It's perhaps no surprise that with that connection to British military greatness, Arthur ended up in the army himself. He enrolled in a military academy at 16, and after graduating 2 years later, he would spend the next 4 decades in postings around the world, everywhere from Ireland to Canada to Gibraltar to Egypt and even India. He saw action in several battles and met President Ulysses S. Grant in Washington, D.C. in 1870. Arthur married Princess Louise Margaret of Prussia in 1879, and they had 3 children, including their eldest daughter Margaret, who would go on to marry the heir to the Swedish throne. In 1911, like his brother-in-law, the Marquess of Lorne before him, Arthur was appointed Governor-General of Canada, a post he would hold for 5 years. The prince loved the country deeply, both the eastern cities and the wild western part of the country. According to Mohawk tribe member Pauline Johnson, her father had made Arthur a chief of the Iroquois nation in a ceremony back in 1869, and he passionately defended Arthur as a friend of the First Nations people. Arthur died on January 16, 1942, aged 91. Born in 1853, Prince Leopold's life was hampered by the fact that he was born with hemophilia. While history would prove some of Queen Victoria's daughters also carried the recessive gene and passed it on to their children, Leopold was the only son who inherited the condition. Despite the very real danger that any injury could kill him, as well as suffering from epilepsy, the prince still managed to have a pretty full life. Unlike most of his siblings, Leopold attended college at the University of Oxford. There, he became friends with both Alice Little and the man who was inspired to write Alice in Wonderland for her, Charles Dodgson, aka Lewis Carroll. Leopold and Little remained friends for the rest of his life. Despite carrying a deadly condition that could be passed on to his children or grandchildren, Leopold was still expected to marry. In 1882, he wed Princess Helena of Waldeck and Pyrmont, and they had 2 children, one of which was born after Leopold's premature death. In 1884, Leopold was in France when he fell on some stairs. The injuries that resulted were too severe for a hemophiliac to recover from, and he died aged 30. Princess Beatrice was the last of Queen Victoria's children, born in 1857, and the monarch planned for her youngest child to stay beside her forever, unmarried and performing as essentially a personal servant. This meant Beatrice held an important position at court and was even allowed access to government papers that Victoria refused to let her heir Bertie see. For many years, Beatrice was okay with this plan, having declared as a child, "I shall never be married, I shall stay with my mother." There were some men whose names came up as possible husbands, most notably Grand Duke Louis IV of Hesse, the widower of Beatrice's sister Alice. But Queen Victoria wanted her daughter home with her, and Beatrice seemed to want this too, until 1884 when she attended a wedding and met Prince Henry of Battenberg. Beatrice wanted to marry him, but Queen Victoria, the most powerful woman in the world, wouldn't allow it.
Somebody said the Queen is absolutely insane when it comes to asserting her own maternal authority.
The women were at an impasse for months, refusing to speak to each other while still living together. At dinner, they would pass notes when necessary. Finally, Victoria gave in on the condition the couple move in with her so she still had Beatrice around at all times. The couple had 4 children and were very happy. Beatrice was the last of Queen Victoria's children to die, aged 87 in 1944.